The first time I saw that SUV push through my ranch gate, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Out here in the valley, people sometimes get lost, and I try to be neighborly. But after the second and third time, I realized it wasn't an accident. Someone was deliberately treating my private ranch like their shortcut, and that didn't sit right with me. My land isn't just dirt and grass, it's years of hard work, money, and sweat poured into every fence post and gate. And yet here was this person barreling through as if the signs reading, "Private property, no trespassing," were written in invisible ink. It wasn't until I finally got close enough to see the driver's face that everything clicked. Behind the wheel sat none other than the HOA president from the neighborhood down the road, the one everyone around here knew as Karen. She wasn't lost, she wasn't confused, and she sure wasn't apologetic. She was cutting through my ranch like it was her personal driveway because it saved her a few minutes on her trip. At first, I tried to keep calm. When you live out here, you learn not to lose your head over every little thing, but this wasn't little. I waved her down one morning as she slowed to open my gate. I stepped out into the road, raised my hand, and said firmly, "Ma'am, this is private land. You can't keep driving through here. There's a main road around the valley you're supposed to use." She gave me this smirk, the kind of look that said she thought she was smarter than me, and replied, "I'm the HOA president. These roads are for community use. You don't make the rules here, I do." Then she actually winked, slid her sunglasses back into place, and drove right past me with a spray of dust from her tires. I stood there, mouth hanging open, wondering how in the world someone could be so arrogant. The next few days only got worse. It wasn't just her SUV anymore. Suddenly, there were golf carts buzzing across my trails, kids on bikes weaving through my pasture, and even a couple of teenagers joyriding on four-wheelers across the edge of my property. They weren't just cutting through quietly, either. They were loud, they spooked my horses, and they left fast food bags tossed along the way. That's when I realized Karen had invited her friends and neighbors to use my land like it was some sort of shortcut or recreation park. I couldn't believe the nerve. I had posted signs, locked my gate, and even chained it properly, but Karen had no problem unhooking the chain and letting herself in like she had a key to my house. I decided to go through proper channels first. I called the sheriff's department and explained what was happening. A deputy came out, took down my statement, and told me they'd issue a warning. Sure enough, the next morning, I saw Karen pulled over near my gate with the deputy talking to her. I thought maybe that would be enough to put an end to it. But the very next day, I watched her SUV slide right through again like nothing had happened. Later, I heard from another neighbor that she told people, "That rancher thinks he owns the valley." Well, the HOA makes the rules here, not him. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just about convenience for her. This was about control. She wanted to prove she could do whatever she wanted, and my gate was just another way to show off her so-called authority. Now, I'm not a man who enjoys conflict, but I wasn't about to let someone stomp all over my property rights. Still, I wanted to be smart about it. Confronting her again wouldn't change a thing, she'd just laugh it off like before. So I started planning. If she wanted to keep driving through, I'd let her, only this time, I'd make sure she'd regret it. I spent that Saturday morning working on the gate. From the outside, it looked exactly the same heavy chain, same latch, same wooden posts. But I installed a hidden spring lock system that would trigger once the chain was unhooked. Once the gate swung open, the lock would snap shut, and it wouldn't stay open unless you knew exactly how to release it from the inside. In other words, anyone trying to sneak through would find themselves trapped in my driveway with nowhere to go. But I wasn't done there. I set up motion sensor cameras around the gate, each one feeding directly to my phone. That way, not only would I see who was messing with my property, I'd also have video proof of everything they did. If Karen tried to pull her stunt again, she wouldn't just be caught in the act, she'd be on tape for the sheriff and, if needed, a judge. I even set one camera low to the ground to catch license plates just in case her friends kept trying to join in. I'll admit, I felt a little like I was setting bait for a wild animal, and in a way, I was. Karen was so predictable in her arrogance that I knew it was only a matter of time before she walked right into my trap. For the first time in weeks, I slept easy that night, knowing I'd finally taken back control of my own land. Sure enough, 2 mornings later, as the sun started rising, I heard it, the roar of an engine I'd come to know too well. Karen's SUV pulled up to my gate, her window rolled down, and she leaned out with that same smug look. She reached for the chain like she'd done a dozen times before, completely unaware that the game had changed. As I watched from my porch, sipping coffee, I felt a grin spread across my face. I had a front row seat to what was about to happen. The moment she unlatched the chain and swung the gate, the spring lock clamped into place with a metallic snap. Karen didn't even notice at first. She drove forward, expecting the gate to stay open, but as soon as her SUV crossed the line, the gate swung shut behind her. She hit the brakes, glanced in her rearview mirror, and for the first time, her smug expression vanished. She backed up and tried to push it open again, but the lock held firm. She tried shaking it, kicking it, even ramming it lightly with her bumper, but nothing worked. She was stuck, and the cameras were rolling the whole time. Watching from my phone, I nearly laughed out loud. All that arrogance, all those speeches about being the one who makes the rules, and now she was boxed in like a rat in a trap. She had walked right into the lesson I'd prepared for her, and I knew this was just the beginning of the reckoning she had coming. Karen sat there in her SUV, shifting in her seat as if she couldn't believe what had just happened. She honked the horn twice, then leaned out the window and shouted toward my house like I was supposed to come running. "Open this gate right now," she barked. "You can't keep me locked in here, this is illegal." But the more she yelled, the less powerful she seemed. From my porch, I watched her scramble, first tugging at the gate herself, then fiddling with the chain, then trying to shove it open with her bumper. Nothing worked. The lock I'd installed was doing its job exactly as planned. She was stuck on my property, and there wasn't a thing she could do about it. Max, my German shepherd, noticed the commotion too. His ears perked up, and he gave that low, steady growl he always used when something wasn't right. I patted his head, smiled, and said, "Easy boy, let's go see what our guest has to say for herself." We walked down the gravel path toward the gate. Karen spotted us and immediately went into a full-blown tantrum. She threw her hands up and yelled, "This is harassment. I'm the HOA president, and you're going to regret this. The entire valley falls under HOA jurisdiction, and I have every right to be here." Her voice cracked a little, though. The confidence she usually oozed wasn't quite there anymore. I pulled out my phone and held it up so she could see the live feed from the camera. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady, "this is private property. You've ignored my signs, you've ignored the sheriff's warnings, and you've ignored me. Now the cameras have recorded every second of you trespassing. You aren't trapped, you're being held accountable." For a split second, she looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. Then she tried a different tactic. Her tone shifted from shouting to fake sweetness. "Look, maybe we can work this out. You let me through, and I'll talk to the HOA board about making things easier for you. Maybe we could even waive some fees." She flashed a tight smile, but her eyes were darting around nervously. It was the kind of bargaining a person does when they realize they're caught with no good excuse. Before I could respond, the situation escalated in a way she never expected. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up behind me, lights flashing red and blue against the morning sky. Turns out the motion sensor cameras I'd installed weren't just recording, they were also connected to an alert system I'd set up to notify local law enforcement. The deputy stepped out, one hand resting on his belt, and walked over with the kind of weary expression that said he already knew exactly who he was dealing with. "Morning," he said to me, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, didn't we already warn you about staying off this property?" Karen launched into a frantic explanation, words tumbling out like water from a broken faucet. "This man locked me in here. He's kidnapping me. You need to arrest him right now." She slammed her hands against the steering wheel, her face red and her hair sticking out at odd angles. The deputy didn't buy a word of it. He sighed, shook his head, and said flatly, "No, ma'am. You put yourself in there. What I see is criminal trespassing and possible property damage." Then he looked back at me. "You want to press charges?" I nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir. She's been warned too many times. Enough is enough." Karen exploded again, screeching about lawsuits and how she would bury both of us in legal fees. But her threats sounded hollow now. The deputy calmly opened her car door, asked her to step out, and when she refused, he simply called for backup. Within 10 minutes, another cruiser arrived, followed by a tow truck. Karen was dragged out of her SUV, handcuffed, and placed in the back of the cruiser as she screamed about being a pillar of the community, and how this was an abuse of power. Her SUV was hauled off my driveway like a piece of junk, and just like that, the trap had done its job. I thought that would be the end of it, but in many ways, it was just the beginning. News travels fast in a small community, and by the next day, everyone knew what had happened. Word spread about the rancher who trapped the HOA president, and how she'd been hauled off in handcuffs. Neighbors who had once been afraid to speak up suddenly felt emboldened. One woman stopped by my fence just to say thank you. She told me Karen had fined her $200 for planting flowers in the wrong color. Another man told me Karen had trespassed on his land once to measure his shed and threatened to have it torn down. Story after story came out, and each one painted the same picture. Karen had ruled through intimidation, and now she was finally paying the price. A week later, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. This time, it wasn't in a small back room with only a few people. The community center was packed to the walls, residents angry and demanding answers. I decided to attend, bringing along the footage from my cameras. The board tried to start the meeting calmly, but people immediately began shouting. "She needs to resign." One man yelled, "We want refunds for all those bogus fines." Another shouted. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't even need to say much. I simply plugged in my phone and played the video of Karen breaking into my gate, then panicking when it closed behind her. The room erupted. Half the crowd laughed at her foolishness, the other half roared with outrage. The board had no choice. That night, they unanimously voted to remove her as HOA president. The cheers that followed shook the building. People clapped me on the back, shook my hand, and patted Max's head like he was part of the team. For the first time since moving into that valley, I saw genuine unity among my neighbors. They weren't afraid anymore. Of course, Karen didn't take it quietly. From what I heard, she tried to file a lawsuit against me for emotional distress. She claimed being trapped inside my gate had traumatized her. My lawyer laughed when he saw the paperwork. "She won't win a dime," he said. And he was right. When the case went before a judge, it was thrown out almost immediately. The footage, the police reports, and her long history of complaints left her with no ground to stand on. In fact, the judge warned her that if she continued wasting the court's time, she'd face even harsher penalties. After that, Karen's downfall was complete. Neighbors who once followed her rules out of fear stopped paying attention altogether. People planted whatever flowers they wanted, parked where they wanted, and lived without the constant fear of fines. The HOA, stripped of its bully-in-chief, started acting like an actual community organization again instead of a dictatorship. And Karen, she became a ghost in her own neighborhood, avoided by the very people she once lorded over. As for me, life on my ranch went back to peace and quiet. The gate still stands, stronger than ever, and every time I hear it creak open when I come home, I smile, remembering the day it snapped shut on the one person who thought she was untouchable. Max still perks up whenever a car comes down the road, but now it's usually a friendly neighbor dropping by to chat, not an entitled trespasser. Looking back, I realized the trap wasn't just about protecting my land, it was about sending a message. You can't bully your way through life forever. Sooner or later, arrogance meets consequences. And when it does, sometimes it sounds just like the snap of a gate lock closing behind you.